Okay, so welcome to the new video of Unqork. So yeah, hope you people are doing good. So yeah, in the previous video, uh, I will just mention that previous video in this playlist on the top of this, so you can go through that if anyone is watching this video for the first time. So here, what we are doing is, uh, let me just recap on it. So we had created a front end where we will select the request type from this drop down, and we had created this API which is something would look for the request type, and in this rule we will decide if that request type is get people, then we are going to call this calc map data, right, which is going to set the data which is present in this dt people data to this response parameter. So basically, let me just show you what it will do once we click on execute. Yeah, let me open the network tab. I have selected get people. So if I click on execute, so if you see the network tab here, this is a payload that we are passing. We are passing the request type as get people, as I just mentioned, and in the preview we are getting this response, right? So how to debug that, right? So from the API perspective, here we have built a sample API which is just going to send us back this data, which will have name, age and index. So just two objects where it is going to pass, and pretty simple, right? Straightforward. But let's suppose this is the huge API. I mean, API isn't like, here some huge logic is there where a lot of things are there. We are doing a lot of calculations, we are calling the external APIs, and then we are finally setting that final response to this response parameter, which is then further displayed on this preview time, right? So if anything goes wrong, so how we are going to debug, right? One way is just go there and see step by step, right? Like the first element is init on load, then this is on new submission, and so on. So what this init will do, we'll check that one by one, and in this way it is one way of debugging. This is fine in case of a smaller API which is like this. So we can see like only four components are there which are used for logic processing. But if there is a lot of things, right, it is very difficult to get this one by one, right? To debug this one by one if there is any issue. So how to do that? So there is one tool which is like provided in Unqork, so which is like server side execution. So this server side execution button you can see here whenever we have selected the module type as API. So whenever we had created a module, so let me show you that. So if we create a module over here, okay, it is taking time. Let's wait, or let me just refresh this quickly. Okay, I will click on create new. Yes. So when we write here, this is normal process of module creation. So here we give the module type as API, right? So when we select the module type as API, then whatever the module that is that is going to be created, that would be having this option which is server side execution. Cool. So which will help us to run this API directly, just like if you are already aware about the postman, right? So what we do there, so let me open postman. So there we have a window. So if I open a window of a postman, so there we have a window where we put that request payload and we hit the API and we get the response back, right? That is a simple postman tool we use basically to call the API. So let it open till then. So that same thing we are going to do here. So if I click on server side execution, it will open a tool which is like something provided by Unqork to debug the APIs, which is called as server side execution. So okay, let it open. Okay, so as soon as you click on this, it will open like this, and here you will see request method which is put. So this is like something by default selected. We don't need to tweak this. Okay, so whatever the request type of this, that will come up here automatically. So whenever we are creating an API, so for that API the request method is always put. Okay, and this is a module ID. So what is this module ID? We are clicking on this server side execution of this module, so this would be something automatically populated over here, and here you can go through that. And the most important thing is data, right? So here we need to mention this data, what we are going to pass to this API. So what we are passing data here, if you see the payload, so this is the data that we are passing to this API. So that same data we can pass or mention there. So here enter as a JSON, right? Because it is a JSON. So I can click on enter as JSON, copy paste that request payload, whatever we are going to pass to that API. And here this request body comes. So whatever we put, it renders as a request like this. So this is something going to be passed to this API, which we are trying to debug. And here we'll see we are getting kind of a postman kind of a response, right? Not postman kind of thing, but similar to that if you have already used postman. So here basically we call a API, we get the response, that's it, right? So something like that Unqork does here for us. So we pass the request payload which we mentioned here, and it gives us back the response. But okay, and one more thing is result, and in the response parameter you can see the same thing, which is the two objects which we have got back, right, from that API. And one more additional thing or a feature of this server-side execution is we can debug the steps. So for explanation, I have taken this where we just have 3 steps. So what are those 3 steps? So you can go to the debugger, and here this is a stepper. So here you can just click on this next one. So from the right arrow button, you can just go through all the steps by clicking on right. So it will mention here what are the steps executed. So in total there are 3 steps. Okay, so this is step 0 of 3. What it shows is we are like starting the new submission, right? Because this module is something a new submission. So that is what it is mentioned here. And then we have a set init onload. So here it is like given here what are the components that are triggered on this step 1. So here it is setting those things. It is like setting all those components. So first init onload is getting set, then all this init onload, which is like this things, if you see, these are something carried out by Unqork. We are not explicitly setting this things. We are just setting this init onload on new submission. So that's why we are getting here set from null to loaded. So once this component loads, it gets automatically triggered. That is what it is mentioned here. So if you go to the next step, so here you will see execute init onload. So this got executed, okay, which means execute. So here you will see execute whenever that thing is executed, right? Then this init onload will trigger this rule as we have configured, right? So trigger rule check request. So which means step 2 is the step 1 is triggering this rule. So go on to the next step. So execute rule check request type. So once this rule check type is executed, then this rule triggers this calc map data, right? Which is what happening. And then this calc map data is something setting response parameter from null to blank. So why it is null to blank? Because whenever the set operation is there, it is first loaded, right? So once it is loaded from null to blank, and then in the next step, which is third step, you will see we are triggering this calc map data, which is something setting this response parameter value from null to whatever the values we have put into the data table. And finally here you will see that response, right? Response parameter. So these are the 3 steps that are executed as a part of this API. So in this way you can debug all those things. So for explanation purpose I have just taken the simple API, but you can imagine, right, if there are something more than 30 steps. So this is something this tool will come handy to debug these steps one by one and to get the issue to find the issue where exactly which component is failing, and then you can accordingly fix this. Yeah, so that's it from this video, which is server-side execution testing. Hope you have liked this video. If you learned something new and you have liked this, you can just share with other people, and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.